going to talk about A&E's Inmate to Roommate Season 2, Episode 3 with Analisa, Mark, and Vada. So Mark's friend ended up disrespecting Analisa in her own home after Analisa told her that she couldn't stay there. Mark and the girls went outside and they started walking up to the car that belonged to one of the girls, and Mark asked the girls to pop the trunk so he can go ahead and get his bags out the trunk, and they're like, oh, so you're staying? And they seemed pretty salty over the fact that Mark wasn't coming with them. But let's be honest, Mark revealed they had nowhere to go, that they're literally going to be sleeping in their car if they didn't stay at Analisa. So it's not like they really had anywhere to go besides the car. Mark is on thin ice, and I'm sure at this point he would have probably rather been sleeping in the car with those girls than be at Analisa and Vada's. But he said he really didn't have much of a choice because his PO would only approve certain places. So it sounds like Mark tried a few other options, and Analisa and Vada's was his last option. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if Mark even tried to parole to this girl's car. Like, instead of putting a parole address, he probably put like her car make and model, and the PO was like, oh no, this is not gonna fly. Mark just continued to complain about how musty and stale the house smelled, even though he probably smells because the man has yet to take a shower since being out of prison. And he was like, well, you know, they can't even give me a freaking TV. At least give me a TV. I mean, that would have been nice. Like, at least get the man a small TV or something. But I get it. It's not really their responsibility. They've already done enough for him. But honestly, I wouldn't be shocked, like, if they did get Mark a TV. He would probably be doing things he shouldn't be doing with that TV. He'd probably be staying up all night watching freaky deaky videos because we know how much of a little horn dog Mark is. Let's be honest though, even if they did give him a TV, he would still probably not appreciate it, and he would still find the next thing to complain about that he doesn't have. Then producers decided to sit down Analisa and Vada and get their thoughts on everything. They were asked by the producers if they were going to continue letting Mark stay with them. And Analisa said, I don't think so. I don't think it's going to work out. You know, I try to be there. I try to help Mark. And then Vada spoke up and he's like, you know, I'm going to give Mark another chance. I'm going to give him at least 10 chances because that's what a kid in special ed gets. Analisa just looked over at her husband, wondering if he was in special ed after hearing that comment come from him. And she was looking like, oh no, I did not agree to giving him 10 whole chances. And right as they're talking, Mark suddenly comes strolling right back in the door. And she's like, what the hell are you doing? I told you you're done here. And Mark was like, no, I'm about to get settled in. I'm coming to my room. And Vada's just like sitting there laughing, like, is this dude really serious? And Analisa was like, well, I don't like the constant disrespect. I don't like how you asked me to have these girls stay here because I don't know what the hell you were thinking or why that was okay. And Mark was like, well, what kind of man would that make me if I didn't try to help them find a place to stay? But it's like, okay, yes, you're trying to help them out, but you're also not being considerate of Ada or Analisa whatsoever. Mark doesn't even have his own spot, so he is in no position to be offering up other people's places for these girls to stay. And Analisa was like, you know, we gotta figure something out because you can't just be gone all night. You're gonna have to follow some rules because you asked me to hold you accountable, and that's exactly what I'm gonna do. So she told him that he needed to be in by 11 every single night. And he started freaking out. He's like, that is unacceptable. That is not happening. And I think that doesn't sound bad at all. And his probation officer, they're gonna have restrictions and they're not gonna want him to be out after a certain part of the night anyways. And when you get like that late in the night at 2 o'clock, not many good things happen at that time of the night. So he's only putting himself in a position to get in trouble and go back to prison. What he really needs to be worried about right now is getting a job. And I mean, I kind of get it because Mark has been locked up since he was a teenager, and a lot of us in our teenage years, that's when we would hang out with our friends, drive around, do stupid stuff, listen to music. And Mark missed out on a lot of that. So, a lot of these guys who get locked up as teenagers, when they get out, they're still kind of in that same phase in their head where they just want to drive around and hang with the homies. You know how you have that one parent that's a little easier than the other typically, and if you're gonna do something, you know you're gonna ask that parent because they're more likely to say yes. And that's kind of how Mark looks at Vada. He looked at Vada for answers when he knew Analisa wasn't budging on being home later than 11 p.m. And Vada was like, okay, here, I'll work with you. If you can be home by 11 p.m. for a week straight, then we'll talk about it. Mark was still pissed off at that. And it's like, I would have been asking for a lot more. I would have been like, okay, once you get a job and you can keep a job for at least a month and help out around the house, then we'll talk about possibly staying out later. And hopefully by then you won't even need to because you'll be so busy working. And Analisa spoke up and she's like, a week is not long enough. And that's true. That is not long enough for someone to prove themselves. So they decided on 2 weeks. And I still think 2 weeks ain't bad at all. But Mark thinks it sounds so difficult. Then Mark and Vada decided to have like little boys' night, and they decided to go to hookah lounge. And they sit down, and Mark tells Vada, yeah, you probably don't get to really say what you want to say with your wife around all the time. Acting like he acts one way around his wife and another way when he's not around. And Vada had the perfect response. He said, I say exactly what I want to say when I want to say it. And Mark is just so mad disrespectful. The way he says things and how he says them, it'll just make somebody want to start throwing hands. Then Vada was like, how I see it is happy wife, happy life. And he said, and Analisa may seem like a tough cookie, but she's extremely sensitive. And when Mark said all those things to her and talked to her the way he did, she feels some type of way about it and she's very hurt. So Vada asked Mark if he can at least go back and apologize to Analisa. And Mark agreed to. He's like, you know what, you're right. And it seemed like everything was starting to go in a better direction. And they go back to the house, and Mark takes Analisa's side and says, hey, I got a few things I want to say to you. Analisa still felt some type of way after the whole incident with the two girls and Mark trying to have them stay over. But she said she was willing to hear him out, and she said she's willing to be more understanding with Mark because she realizes that it's harder for him to communicate because he's just a young boy trapped in a man's body. So she sits down with him and he apologizes to Analisa right from the jump. And he's like, you know, I feel bad. And she's like, you know, I really appreciate that. I just want you to know that I have nothing but good intentions for you, and you told me to hold you accountable, so that's exactly what I'm trying to do. And Mark was like, yeah, I hear you well. You know, I want you to help me. And she kind of got on to him because he wasn't looking her in the eyes. I think the real reason Mark wasn't looking her in the eyes is because he looked like he was extremely stoned. He looked like he smoked a couple fatties before he pulled up on Analisa and Vada. After Mark apologized, Analisa and Mark decided to hug it out. And I was excited. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad they worked things out because I was scared they were going to kick Mark to the curb by the end of the third episode. And then we wouldn't have any more of a storyline for them the rest of the season. But as soon as I was starting to get hopeful, Mark does a interview with the producers and he's like, oh yeah, you know, she may have won the battle, but I'm gonna win the war. He said, I am the finesse king. I'm just doing what I need to do, so they think everything is cool right now. But he's just like bragging about how he's trying to get over on Analisa and Vada, and he's just talking so much crap about them. And he said he just hugged her so she feels like they're cool when they're really not, which basically he's just trying to emotionally manipulate her to thinking that he actually cares and maybe she might go easier on him. And I think that's also why he's trying to become buddy with Deja, Annalisa's daughter. He knew she was a tough cookie, so he was trying to butter her up, and that's what he was trying to do with Analisa with that hug. And I just can't believe he's like bragging about being the finesse king. It just kind of still shows how young-minded he is. Mark seems like a straight up sociopath, and like he has no empathy for people, because how can you not feel a little for these people after they went so much out of their way and try to brag about finessing them? Mark just seems like a user, and he looks at people for what he can try to get out of them. And I don't know, I think I really was starting to see Mark's true colors in this episode, and I wasn't liking it at all. And I feel like the only reason he did apologize to Analisa is just because he has nowhere else to stay. And it's crazy he's bragging about finessing these people who are just trying to help him because they are trying to do a favor for his dead uncle, because nobody else was going to step up and give him a place to stay. Like, that says a lot when you're only like what, 24, 25 years old, and you've already burned all your other bridges, and the only people that are willing to help you, you're already screwing them over and just dragging them constantly every chance you get. Like, karma is gonna come around and bite him in the butt, and I would not trust Mark in my house whatsoever. People who only care about themselves are some of the most dangerous people in the world. But that is it for this video, guys. Let me know what you guys think so far about Mark, Analisa, and Vada and their segments in this episode in the comments below. Check out my lashes at AccordingtoAmber.com. Give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, and thank you so much for watching.